A month ago, I took a poll and I asked everyone what they would like to see as the fan favorite wine to be produced next. A month later, it turns out that the top winner of that poll was an apple pie mead. I've now gathered the ingredients and it's now time to make that mead. Hi, I'm Charles and welcome to DIY Fermentation, your site for doing fermentation on a shoestring budget. Now then, before I begin, I'm happy to announce that we have one new member, Clint O'Hare. Thank you very much for helping support this channel. It's gratefully appreciated. Now then, let's get on to business. Okay, to make our apple pie mead, we will be using the following. I've got 4 pounds of Granny Smith apples. I'm going to be using 2.5 pounds of 100% raw honey, clover, half a cup of brown sugar. For spices, I'm going to be using cinnamon or cinnamon sticks, ground allspice, and ground nutmeg. For wine yeast, I'm going to be using a Red Star Premier Côte des Blancs wine yeast, principally because of its low alcoholic volume, about 14%, and it's kind of a slow fermenter. I'll be using straining bags with this one. We'll need enough water to give us our 1 gallon measure, or 4 liters. Something to do primary fermentation in, preferably something with a wide mouth top so you can get fruit in. After a week of primary, we need something to rack into our secondary carboy. I've got a 1 gallon container here. Airlock with stopper, and again, this particular fermenter on the right, the big one, does have its own built-in airlock, which is something you'll need if you don't have one. A hydrometer to help us determine just what our wine is doing at any given point in time, and also to help us to determine our final alcohol by volume. And of course, as always, using the sanitizer of your choice. Make sure that all of your winemaking equipment has been cleaned and sanitized. And that is what I'm going to be using to make this mead. Now, without the benefit of an apple press, there are still several ways that we can use to extract the juice from these apples. Now, if you've got one, you can use one of these. Or you can use one of these. If you don't have those, you can still use this. And one that we will not be using because I know it doesn't work, you can use one of these. Now, just to keep things simple, I think I'm just going to use a simple box grater. Now, this part of the plan should be fairly straightforward. What we want to do is that we want to peel our apples, grate them, get them into straining bags, get the bags into a pan, and cover the pan with about half a gallon of our water. Now all I need to do is just tie these off, and let's get them in the kitchen. Now here in the kitchen, what we want to do is that we want to take our bags of shredded Granny Smith apples, get those in the pot, along with our half a gallon of water. And we want to bring this up to a boil. I mean, it doesn't have to be a fast, rapid boil or anything like that. We just want to help try and break down some of this apple. And all we need to do is, like I said, bring it up to a boil. Turn the heat off. I mean, don't just let it boil and boil and boil. We're not trying to cook it like that. We just want to get it hot and boiling slightly. A simmer will work. turn off the heat, and then let it come down to room temperature. And that's what we're doing right now. Okay, our mixture has come to a boil. We turn the heat off, and we can just go ahead and let that come down to room temperature. Well, not quite room temperature. We still want it warm because we want to be able to mix in our honey and also our brown sugar a little bit more easily. So, yeah, let's let it come down to it's like at least warmth at a touch. And then we'll go ahead and add our honey. Speaking of which of our honey, we'll probably have this sitting in a pan or a pot of hot water so that it will flow a little bit more easily out of the bottle. All right, now that our apple juice mixture has come down to, well, it's still kind of hot, but I mean, you could at least put your hand on the side without burning it. We're going to go ahead and add the remainder ingredients. One, we're going to add our 2 pounds of raw clover honey that I had sitting in a warm container to help it flow a little bit more easily. So we're just going to go ahead and get that in there. And yes, I am going to get every last little bit of honey that's still in this container. We're going to go ahead and add our 1 cup of packed brown sugar. Actually came in at about a pound. Actually, it came in at a pound. But go ahead and get that in there. Let's get that incorporated. And since we're in here playing around, let's go ahead and give the apple shreds a nice good pack down to extract a little bit more of the juice. All right, we're going to add our 1 cinnamon stick. Good a spot as any. Next thing we're going to do is go ahead and add, let's go ahead and add 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. And 1/4 teaspoon of allspice. I mean, thereabouts. You don't have to be super precise about it. Let's go ahead and give that a stir. Incorporate that a little bit. Mashing down on the bags just because they're there. That having been done, we can go ahead and put our cover back on. And now we can let this come down to room temperature. Now that our mixture has come down to room temperature, it is now time to transfer it to our fermenter. This time around, I think I'm going to just try and pour everything in, with the exception of the bags. Which of course worked like a charm. Now, needless to say, the reason why I did not want the bags in there was simply due to the fact that we need to bring our measure up to 1 gallon or 4 liters total. And the bags add volume, but not necessarily the amount of liquid that we need. Now, this 1 gallon fermenter does have marks to indicate, the various levels. So I'm going to add some of our remaining water to bring our level up to 1 gallon. Which is about yay, leaving about that much water left. In fact, I probably will go about 1 cup over 1 gallon for one simple reason. When I rack this into secondary, I like to have at least 1 cup at least 1 cup extra so that I can freeze that in time for our next racking, so that when I rack it off the release that's on the bottom of the carboy, I can replace it, not with water, not with marbles, not with anything else but the musk that I started with. So now would be a good time to take a hydrometer reading. Give that a good little stir. Okay, good enough. Looks like our reading is going to come in at a respectable 1.065, which is coming in a little bit low. So what I think I'm going to do is that I'm going to add some additional brown sugar to bring my hydrometer reading up to about 1.080. So let me go ahead and get that done. Take another reading. After adding another half a cup of firmly packed brown sugar, which came up to about 4 ounces, we're taking a second hydrometer reading, and it looks like it's coming in at 1.084. All right, now we can get our straining bags in there. Well, they'll do some good. Okay, it's now time to start the process of turning our juice into yeast. I've got 1/4 teaspoon of wine yeast that I'm going to try and evenly distribute across the top. Now, if you wish to bloom your yeast beforehand, please feel free, or any other method you use to prep your yeast, hydrate your yeast, please feel free. But this time around, I'm just simply going to just lay it across the top as I do with most of my wines. Put our cover back on. Okay, it is now time to label our creation. And what we have here is the following. We have an apple pie mead started on this date with an original gravity reading of 1.084. Now all we need to do is once a day for the next 3 days is to come back, open it up, give it a vigorous little stir to help the yeast out with a little bit more oxygen. After 3 days, just leave it alone. Put it aside somewhere where it's preferably not in direct sunlight, and let it go through primary fermentation. After those 5 to 7 days, depending, you can then go ahead and rack it into secondary and then begin the process of actually making your wine. Now, of course, there are additional follow-up steps that I do have outlined in my playlist under winemaking operations. Of course, there's several rackings, there's degassing, there's bottling, there's pasteurization for most of us, before your wine is actually going to be really ready to drink. So I suggest you go ahead and check out those playlists, those videos, and tell us what you think. Any changes to the recipe you'll find in the comment section or the description section below with the ingredients for this recipe. Again, subscriptions, just click on that subscribe button. Let me know I'm appreciated. Donations are appreciative. And from there, we'll see you in the next video.